Okay, here I am. Here we are. Hi. I am Jenny Lee. I am the founder and mother of Temple Belonging. And I am here in this particular moment, so fully human, so fully in the continuous learning edge, emergent field of what I'm doing, what it means to do this, and how much there's to learn. So, just to name, I was supposed to do this yesterday, and YouTube was like, you can't yet. And I was like, oh, good to know. And then this morning, I tried to do it again, and I can't see myself on the computer when I'm going live. So, I'm also recording it on my phone, so I have something to talk to you. And in my body in this moment, there's just like this constriction, there's this anger, there's this confusion, there's disorientation, threaded with like, why am I doing this? What am I doing this? Why? Who in their right mind would sign up for this? And so it's really the perfect time to talk about the heart of this gathering, the insanity of tending to belonging in this time, and the level of humanity that is required to do this, not even well, but just to do it, just to show up with the willingness to get it wrong, with the willingness to get it right, with the willingness to say, this is a complete soulful yes. And I'm not going to wait to have it all perfectly figured out for me to continue to follow this path. And so that's how my morning is doing. I have a little latte, and I'm here to connect with you as humans. And so my deep, deep, deep gratitude to anybody who's watching this, anybody who has participated in the gathering in the first couple of years of its becoming and finding its legs, and my deep gratitude to those of you who are joining the membership. This is really a really, really, how many times can I say really? This is a really awesome space for us to tend to women-centric community and belonging and edginess and intimacy and wisdom and wildness and education and just inspiration for a way outside of the gathering. You know, what I've realized is that the gathering is so fucking awesome. And it is an event, and everything feels awesome at an event. You know, we save up our money so that we can go because events inherently cost money, and the world costs money right now. And that's a big part of our work here, is how to do both, how to tend and foster community and still run a business, run an event where women get to be really well compensated for their time. And that's the edge. So those of you that are tending to the garden with us in a more consistent way by being part of the membership, thank you for your time. My deep prayer is that this is a growing field of women and conversation and offerings that gets to live longer than the intensity and the magnitude of the once a year gathering. So thank you. So, belonging. What an audacious title to name something. That's been my contemplation. And I'd love to give you a funny story about where this idea came from. And that is, I was on a run out in Carson, Washington, where I used to live. And, you know, many of you witnessing this are going to also relate to the feminine, intuitive, inspired state. Things just land in our laps. And that was what happened with the Temple of Belonging. It was just this one-liner, the Temple of Belonging. And I'm like, wow, great. Is that where I'm at now? Is that what this is? The land here telling me that's what its name is? Is the temple belonging a business offering? Is it a place? What is it? And so, me as the sidereal Virgo and tropical Libra that I am, was like, it's obviously a business offering. And I've spent my whole life being a self employed healing artist and have squished lots of magical things into offerings that maybe should have and some should have not been. And so for years, the Temple of Belonging was like all of my healing arts put together in this like one long ceremony. And that was really beautiful. But it wasn't what it was meant to be. And over the years, it became really clear. And I attended some of my first big women's gatherings. And actually, if this is a cute story, at my very first women's gathering was Origins. Holla to my sisters over at Origins. I had a really awesome experience in general, but I have pretty severe chronic back pain. Welcome to being a human. And during that gathering, all of my back pain disappeared for no reason. I was camping. Maybe I needed a firmer, earthier bed, and I was walking, but I sleep and I walk in my regular life, and there seems to have been no reason for the back pain to just disappear. And so my comedian side was like, ha ha ha, of course, it was because of the men. And that was funny. And I just sat with that for a while. But that gathering impacted me in two major ways. One, I had never got to be around hundreds of women for 4 or 5 days straight, let alone like 2 weeks, because I was there for 2 weekends that were back to back. And it was so juicy for my nervous system, for my body, for my feminine spirit. And I felt like I belonged. And not in the way of like, I got along with everybody or everything went the way that I wanted it to. But I, as a woman, belonged with these other women who were all exploring what it means to be a woman together. And it was incredible. And another thing that happened during that gathering was this confusion and or heartbreak that I drove from Oregon to California to be with all these women. And some of them became friends afterwards. And yet I wanted something that was more local, more community-based, more like family reunion style vibes, right? Where it's like, it's an event that costs money once again, and that we get to return year after year and like kind of spiral in this closer knit, more bioregional way. And so I was impacted by the gathering, was so in love with it, wanted to do more and more women's work, went to a few other women's gatherings, and I am who I am. And I was like, I can do that. Let's do that. I want to do that here in the gorge, here in Portland, here where my feet live, where my people are, and just make something. Here we are, just following the threads of crazy inspiration and a pretty audacious sense of self-confidence, which has been tested, which is, I think, part of the path. And so as the story goes, I've hosted concerts for my birthday for many, many years. And a few years ago, I hosted a concert when I wanted to host a women's gathering, but instead I hosted a concert. And that was the last birthday concert where I was like, ugh, people are just getting drunk. Doesn't feel good. There's not this cohesion. There's not this coherence. There's not this like, what? There's not this why. Why are we here? Why are we gathering? You know, I love music. I'll always gather for music. And that like aching that I didn't do the women's gathering meant that I had to wait a whole nother year and then be like, okay, well, next year for my birthday or around then, we're going to do a women's gathering. And I knew then that it was going to be the Temple of Belonging. And the first women's gathering was here at my home at this land that we rent. The landlord had no idea, which was super edgy. We had like 55 women or so, and it was just like Venmo me, text me, come over. And it was so beautiful and so sweet. And like this really robust seed that got planted in a lot of our hearts of like, this feels good to be with just women for multiple days. I remember talking to my sister friend, Nina, when everybody started to arrive, I was like, I think, did somebody microdose me? Like, I feel like weird. And I have plenty of anxiety, but it was different. It was this um, gooey, like, what is this? And she was like, I feel that too. I think it's because, one, like masculine energy is as a frequency, but there was just something so sweet about the ways that when all the women came and set up their camp, everybody was so eager to help everybody else. Like, can I carry your stuff for you? Do you need anything in the kitchen? And it was like we just like timeline hopped into this way of like, oh my God, we know how to do this. Women know how to be together. It's not, I mean, somehow it does need to be managed, but that first year was this like sweet blooming of like, and here we are. And we've always been here. We just needed a space to permit this. And it was awesome. And so fast forward to the second year being last year, 2023, which is where we rented a new property. We grew in numbers and felt this full swing of what it means to actually open the doors to some of these larger numbers of women. And that was when the study of belonging really took root in myself and just in the inherent nature of the gathering. And some of the things that I really wanted to share today about belonging is and womanhood and community for just to lob that in there is that I and very few other people are really qualified to tell you or anybody what belonging is, what a woman is, what community is. And there's this part of my spirit that really doesn't want to define things as much as I want to live into it. Because I've taken a lot of different courses and read a lot of different things and talked to a lot of different people about the nature of belonging. And it is a spectrum of socio-political realities of this inherent ecological, humanitarian, Anthropocene, who are we as humans belonging? It's like this cellular genius that we have. It's the subtleties of not trying to fix, heal, save ourselves or others. Like it is this huge sky. And what I was most moved by last year is that how many women showed up to a gathering that was called the Temple of Belonging, when not once ever will we or have we promised that you will belong, that you will feel belonging. And people showed up anyways. And I could like cry again about this. It's just the truest thing that I learned about belonging is that it is a collaborative experience, not just with our human to human communities, but with our spirits, with the times that we have chosen, if you believe that, to incarnate into. And it's something that gets to be remembered, not created. And, once again, I want to preface everything that I'm going to share today about belonging from a lens of this is what I have learned. This is not the only thing about belonging that is true. This is not a complete, comprehensive offering. I don't know what is, frankly. And this is what I love about the women's gathering in this community here is that like we each hold our little threads that create this beautiful tapestry and blanket that warms our bodies and our spirits. And if any one person says that they have the whole story, I would run in the opposite direction. But belonging seems to me to be something that is actually so incredibly innate, that we have been convinced out of, that the authors, the authorities of our lives for many generations have colonized us or we have been the colonizer, and other words for these types of patterns of writing ourselves out of nature, writing ourselves out of the Garden of Eden in some way where we don't not belong. We just forgot our belonging is not negotiable. Like it's like the sky is blue. We belong. It just is. And I believe that we're here. I like that it's not an argument. And yet I have so much lived experience and compassion for all of us who have experienced immense pain and suffering and harm for our own preconceived beliefs that we don't belong, or the ways that others have very, very much convinced us that we don't belong. And so I know that exploring the nature of belonging is not a 5-step process to like, all right, cool, we do these things together, now we belong. It is a fluid, moving process of remembrance that requires us to not only decondition our own stories, our own victimhoodness, that's a word, our own wounds, and our own ways of seeing the world, but it requires us to rethread ourselves intimately and lovingly with ourselves and with the rest of the living world, and frankly the non-living world. And so how do I want to say this? What if belonging has always been there? How do we engage with our communities? How do we show up to our churches, to our gatherings, to our families, to our beloveds, to nature, to the big city? How do we show up in the world from a place, if we did believe or could remember that we already belonged, and we could let go of the ways that we've been convinced out of it? Like, even in this moment, how would that feel in your body? Would it soften the breath? Would it offer more compassion for those who are still stuck in their conditioning or their colonial mentality or their supremacy programming? Like, what if they too belong just as they are? And I think that is one of the hardest things, is that it cannot be one-sided. That if I seek to belong in my truest, strangest, most imperfect nature, because I do, I really do, then that means that you also get to exist in your perfect, weird, in like nature. And so often belonging can, one of a pillar of it, let's say, could be reciprocity. And there's, the nature of reparations, right? And the lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes of injustices that have happened to many, many people from all over the world, but specifically on this land here in North America. And the reciprocity can look like, land back, reparations, financial reality, political and judicial justice. And on a subtle level, what I've noticed, it's just what I've noticed, is can we give the gift that we are asking for, even if we've been harmed, even if we feel like we have been wounded, even if we, fill in the blank of what has not happened to you and your people in the ways that you identify with the world. And this state of reciprocity gets really crunchy and a little out of integrity when, let's say, I want to belong in my fullness, but somebody over there is doing something that I don't like, or they're a bad person, or they're selfish, or they're greedy, or they're the man that we don't like, or they're the embodiment of the patriarchy or the shadow of the feminine, like whatever the other is, if we also don't let them belong, we are writing ourselves out of our own belonging. Because it's of my belief that belonging and freedom, right? Liberation, all these things have to be for everybody or they don't exist at all. And so I'm starting us here at this like crunchy level of, can I give my enduring acceptance and allowance for all of the things that I don't like and that I don't prefer as a way to initiate and reclaim my own belonging. I could go deeper into that, and maybe for those of you that watch this, we can riff in the chat space of if this feels true for you, because it might not, and that's all right. And yet I have a prayer that keeps guiding me towards belonging is inherent to all of life. That I don't believe that we would be here for no reason. I don't believe that things would be happening for no reason. I do not know what that reason is. But that life is expressing itself in the way that it is because life willed it to be so. And my little humans parts are like, I'm down if I can understand. And if I approve of it, and if it works well for me in the way that I identify in this lifetime. And that brings me to the next piece where it's like, there's a good amount of conditionality in our belonging, in our own desires for belonging, and in the ways that we allow others to exist and belong as well. And yeah, I don't have a lot of definitions for belonging, even though I do like etymology and language and dissecting like the soul of these words that we're using to share a conversation, to share a concept and a cosmology, frankly, right? And, Stephen Jenkinson, who's one of my favorite humans and thinkers and philosophers, the belonging is to be in the longing. It is, God, I didn't think I was going to get so emotional today. It is this like yearning for union with life again. It is this innate, original, like, I want to be here. I want to fit here. I hunger, I crave to be threaded into this fabric of life where everything already exists perfectly as is, outside of my opinions, beliefs, and judgments. I too am here with this crazy life, right? And the thing about belonging is equally like the desiring of that threadedness with life itself. And I think it's also equally this state that we embody that gives way to so much confidence and ease and surrender to that which is greater than the self. When I feel like I belong, not here, not at the women's gathering, not at my house, not at my job, not at the grocery store, but just I exist in the world and I belong here everywhere I go. I am a child of the earth. I am part of this human kin. I am no different than the atoms and the cells and the elements that make up the trees and the grass. I belong. And I think we have squished belonging into this like anthropocentric, do you like me? Are you going to be nice to me? Are we going to agree on things? And so there's this yearning to be threaded with life itself in just the truth of what is, in the isness, that is so before and beyond all the opinions and judgments and critique, right? And then there's this state of being that just can see itself in everything. I think of it as like interbeing or individuation, where it's not isolation and individualization. It is this state where I can see myself in all things, and I can see all things in myself. It almost creates this sense of permeability in my field, which is very true. The cell walls of my body, I am more space than I am form and density, and so are you, and so is everything. And we are just a condensation of energy and matter, and then my computer is just a condensation of energy and matter, and it really flows more than we can obviously see. We can't perceive so much of this, and I think for a reason, because we would be crazy. But I think the other side of belonging is this knowing, this deep sense of we are not separate beings at war with ourselves, at war with each other. We are one great life expressing itself in these multitudes of individual expressions, this whole tree with all these little flowers and all these weird little branches, and everything looks different, but it has this one core life force energy that moves through all of it. Maybe that's a little far out, but that to me is how I understand belonging. I love to think of the breath as that which gives us life. Water is life, and soil is life, and earth is life, and sun is life. And I can go a long time without drinking water. I can go an even longer time without eating food. I can only go a few minutes without breathing. And I love the breath as this reminder of it's my breath, but I can never have it. My heart is this thing that stays with me for my whole life. And my soul, maybe even longer so. But the breath, it's it powers me, but I can't have it. And we all share this invisible field of this oxygen, this atmosphere that gives us life. And I love to think of that as a very living metaphor for the ways that we are threaded with life, and we are not these singular individual beings that have to continue to find the ways that we're different and special, and highlight and underline all the ways that you did this to me and I did that to you, instead of coming underground and getting into the subterranean domains of we've all been through fill in the blank. And when we can see each other on this level of expressions of life itself, something really cool happens. And I've seen it. And there's a level of softening that can be really helpful. I don't want to say it's required, but that can be really helpful. And that softening, in my humble, not so humble opinion, is a process of letting go of the story of the victimhood, of the supremacy, of however your identity and what your lineage is expressing. One of my mottos is, I am no better than that which I judge, and I'm no less than that which I praise. We just are. And in our modern world, we can get so in the complexity and in the story and in culture work, it's very important to not, one human family that can easily be co-opted and weaponized into a very appropriative, harmful process. And so how does this, we are different. I am different than somebody who was born in South Africa, has their lineages and their story and their culture. And we're supposed to be different. And underneath that, we're also supposed to be exactly who we are. And there's a lot of shame in general. We all know that. It's not new news here. But there can be a lot of shame about who we are. And part of my prayer with the women's gathering is to soften the tendrils of trying to understand why things are the way they are, why I was born into this body with this lineage and this story, why I was crazy enough to start the women's gathering, why you are the way that you are. And, like, let's say you're catching everything I'm saying so far, and we can come into this place of like deep belonging and acceptance for who we are. But that also requires us to stop the self-judgment. That is not so easy to do. And I love being in touch with nature, earth, wildness, wilderness as a really good example of the necessity of diversity. Because we need us to be our unique, authentic, flawed, imperfect, brilliant, beautiful expressions, or else we lose the diversity that life requires for life to thrive. I live here on some beautiful land in Hood River. Half of it is like wild nature. Half of it is a fucking monocropped pear orchard. And I feel like I'm getting the view of like these two options. We can live wild and weird and in our innate belonging, like we came here to like embody our soul's mission. And some people straight up might have came here to be the villain, and they belong, as far as I'm concerned. Fight me on that later if you want. And some of us came here to do other cooler things, in my opinion. And so when we lose that sense of self-permission to be exactly what we are, we lose the diversity that is required for a healthy, diverse ecosystem of our shared humanity. And, maybe we could also look at this like a garden. And this is one of my favorite ways to understand belonging too. Well, they're all my favorite ways. I'm a philosopher at heart. If you haven't caught on to that, this is a very nonlinear conversation, and that's just how I live my life. I've heard it said a lot of times that belonging is also what we give ourselves to, and not what belongs to us. And so similarly, here there is a shift of orientation from what is mine, who am I, to what is that which I am a part of. What is it that I am in service to? What is it that sustains me? Instead of what do I, the other way around. And I got to interview Charles Eisenstein briefly last year. And in a handful of articles that I read about belonging, there was this really consistent thread of I belong to what I give myself to. I belong to that which gives me life. So I belong to the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, the elemental kingdom. I am nothing without everything that it takes to grow an apple, to feed a cow, right? I am nothing. I'm completely codependent with everything about this life and this universe, and I'm thrilled about that. And I think there's an older model of belonging that this belongs to me because I bought it, because I've earned it, because I fit in, right? Because even belonging to a community, right? Like you sit and listen to the elder for 10 years before you're allowed to speak. Like there's those models of belonging. And I'm still in an unfinished process of listening and tracking of what is an emergent way to tend to the garden of belonging in a time where so many people, almost all, feel like they don't belong here. They don't have a sense of community. They don't love themselves. They feel so severed from the fact that they are alive, therefore they belong, and they are worthy, and they are perfect, and they are whole. And my heart just fucking breaks all the time facing that reality and holding just my one little tiny thread of like, let's be together with women about it, and just try to remember when really like this is a mountain and boulder type reality. And in my own heart, I find a lot of peace and reframing and reorienting when I can question, what is it that I belong to? What is it that's got me? Not what do I have, but what part of life is like, we got Jenny. We got her on our side. My team over here, you know? And our world will have us keep wanting and wanting and wanting when it's time to show up in service. It's time to show up in the giving. And that's not, emphasizing a martyr archetype. It is just the subtle breath of like, my organic, authentic being is in service to life. By me being who I am, let's say we're a garden and you're a tomato plant. By you being a tomato plant, that helps me over here, a marigold, grow. You don't have to do anything, right? There's not as much effort as there is a reclamation of what's already true, of what's already here. And, the irony, the irony. There was plenty of people last year that came to the women's gathering that were like, I did not feel like I belonged. And I'm like, okay, thank you for sharing. And that brings me to the next piece. I'm like saying that, thinking that will convince you that this is like some type of linear, well thought out talk. But if any of you that know me, that's not the case. It's just a stream of consciousness, which is the only way that I operate. So thanks for being here. I hope this is awakening something. And if it's not, that's okay too. This piece of, so often I have seen belonging be outsourced. Like, it is your job to make sure that I belong. You need to treat me in a certain way. This and this and this needs to happen for me to feel like I belong in this space. It has to be this level of inclusive and diverse, and like just all these things need to be in place for me to feel like I belong. And I completely understand a lot of those things and have done my best. And a lot of people have to explore that in our businesses, in our events, because of the reality of how unjust so much of our past is with gender and race and socioeconomic standings. Like, we live in a pretty fucking twisted world. And we're doing our best to repair that through our intentional awareness and action-based recalibrations. And yet, if I outsource my sense of belonging to somebody else, is that not the same as just continuing to give my power away? Is that not the same as asking, well, just that. If I need you to do A, B, and C, and D for me to feel like I belong, then I'm going to be chasing fucking breadcrumbs forever. And I guess what I'm trying to advocate for here, and this might be coming from my white woman privilege. This might be coming from the fact that I was born a performer and I love to just assume my belonging. And I'm fine with not belonging in the places that I don't belong. And this is just, I can only filter this through my own lived experience. And that gets to be okay, right? But there is a difference when I go to a party, a birthday party with a lot of people. Let's say I'm new. And I'm just like, I'm going to get to know them. I'm going to be in service to this community. I'm just going to show up and see what's happening. When I'm giving myself to, I'm less concerned if I belong or not. I'm just open. I'm just wow, what's going on here? I'm just going to explore. But when the focus is inward and I'm in my in myself, in my identity or something like this, I'm not sure how to language that. And I'm like, how are they making sure that I belong here? That's a different orientation. And I guess all this to say, I am most interested and most inspired and most softened by what can we do to return to the place where we go to the birthday party and don't come home and be like, oh my God, did they like me? But just be like, wow, that was a birthday party. It was weird. I don't know if those are my people or not. And like, I'm fine and they're fine. Right? There's just this like coexisting of difference, of individuality, of that also gets to be fine. It also gets to be fine. And, in a lot of my personal business and practice and healing arts work, I teach something called truth training. And there is this like people pleasing, outsourcing our power, needing external validation that shows up a lot in the way of who has the authority of your belonging, who has the authority of you to feel courageous and beautiful and good about yourself. Like, who gets to decide that? And this is going to be edgy, but it wants to come out. So in truth training, but also here now, and this comes from modern day mystic Carolyn Myss's work, where there's 3 stages of authority: authorship, decision making, choice. And the first stage is tribal authority. Makes sense, right? When I'm a baby, you don't ask me what I want for dinner, right? Don't make me sign some papers about who I'm going to be when I get older. Don't ask me to write down my own cosmology and beliefs about what I think God is. I probably have a pretty good one, though, if I was a baby. And so for the first few stages of our life, we're in tribal authority. You tell me, am I approved by you? Am I going to be cared for by you? What is the world? You tell me, because I am a baby. And then, ideally, that is initiated through, hopefully, rites of passage, which our modern Western culture is quite lacking in. So it should transition into personal authority, where it's like, I know what I want. That's different from what they want, and I'm good. This is what I want because I trust myself. There's this gravitation inwards for choice making and sense making, and the choice to belong, the choice to remember who I am, the choice to not need external validation and approval all the time for me to feel safe. And my personal opinion, our Western white culture, more than just white, I'm just spitting things out here, has not quite fully integrally transitioned from tribal authority to personal authority. Honestly, what I think has happened is there's the guise of personal authority of like, I can do whatever I want. I'm going to start my own business. Capitalism is actually great for helping people feel like choiceful about how they do and don't want to make money, all these things. But underneath the surface, it is just still a very robust, am I okay here? I need you to tell me that I'm okay here. Is what I'm doing okay? How do you feel about that? There is this undercurrent of almost like hypervigilant tribal authority with the guise of being super empowered and in one's center. There, I said it. And so, when we're a child, our sense of belonging comes from the mother. It comes from our family structure. Ideally, it would come from a village, right? Where we like cultivate safe attachment. And so that one day that attachment can move into authenticity so that we can evolve and have authentic attachment where it's like, I'm weird, I'm different, I'm who I am, you're you, and we don't need to be the same or even get along all the time to know that it's okay to coexist. And so in some way, the temple of belonging is a gentle invitation to practice coming into belonging is an inside job. Maybe safety is also an inside job. And I'm speaking to the woman in you that is listening to this. I'm speaking to the adult in you that is listening to this, and the adult in me that so fucking badly wants the world to do it for me. So good. It would be so beautiful. I could just kick back, someone pay my bills for me, someone just constantly, affirmations are my love language, just tell me every day that what I'm doing matters and that it's a good idea, right? I'm not saying that's not going to happen someday. That'd be great. And the maturing, like belonging, It feels like growing up. To fully root down into my innate belonging and to embody the state that I've been speaking to prior to this point does feel like I have to grow up. I have to let go of needing you and you and you and you and you to be like this so that I feel good about myself. And I get to claim my fucking birthright. I get to claim the fact that belonging is between me and Creator. Belonging is between me and me. And when I claim that for myself, everything changes. Excuse me. I might get it wrong. I might get it very, very right. I might not care about right and wrongness in general. Just like whatever, you get to begin to orient your life as a child of this earth, as a child of the creation of life itself, just as you are. And then to complete the process, as Carolyn Meese articulates in her beautiful book, Anatomy of Spirit, we move from tribal authority to personal authority. But, don't get stuck there, because the third and final triangulation phase is divine authority, where we finally surrender to God, to the great mystery, to the void, to the Holy Mother, to the Holy Father, whatever it is that you have some type of connection to that is greater than yourself, that is the source of this wild, ever evolving, infinite wellspring of life. And this authority movement is, I think, a really beautiful invitation to cultivate a sense of belonging that no longer has to fight people and point fingers. And not that those pieces don't matter. One, I just haven't seen them be very effective. Just going to say that. And two, it can miss what I believe is this really, 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 really important process of self-reclamation, process of calling my spirit back in and saying, no one's going to do this for me. Nobody's going to write me in. I pick up the pen and I write myself into my own story. I write myself into the story of life. I write myself into the story, the timeline that I was born into. I decide. I will not be invited. Belonging is my service. It is what I give myself to. And if I give myself to surrendering my will, to divine authority, that gets pretty good. Gets pretty cute, pretty beautiful, pretty wild, pretty synchronistic, pretty terrifying. And so I love this process of authorship and authority to continue this contemplation of belonging. Because in just community events, being a business owner, being a woman, there's a lot of shit that we have to walk through, that we have to trudge through to get to where we're going. It's like the sister wounds are so real. The spiritual wounds are so real. And I don't know how to change people. And I don't know if I want to. But what I am interested in is inviting us into a different way of relating to life itself that includes other people, that includes ourselves, right? And I think of belonging as like those stacking dolls or like concentric circles. Like the core of belonging is this personal authority. It is like, this is mine. I get to decide. I get to choose, and then it moves out into how is this held in context with my family, with my lover, with my closest relationships. Are they too in their center? Are they too honoring my belonging and honoring theirs, right? Without it being conditional. And then how is that held in my community? How is that held in my state, in my country? And then farther and farther out it goes, it gets harder and harder because there's more and more people doing weird shit. And so I am a believer of the notion that we can ripple out from the center, My activism looks like that. How can we reclaim what is ours so that we can then give that gift to our kin? We can help them remember their inherent belonging. I can't give you your belonging, but I can remind you of how much you already do belong. Cool. Wow. And then that ripples out through the community. And then that ripples out into like our greater communities and our cities and our, all the different ways that we kind of thread this greater and greater and greater tapestry. And it's relational and it's embodied. And maybe one of the last things I'll offer here, I doubt it'll be the last thing. Once again, I'm just saying the thing to pretend like this is cohesive. It's going to be really hard for us to feel belonging if we're constantly judging ourselves or others. Because a judgment energetically is like saying that shouldn't be that way. Something about this is not right. And that notion, that frequency is just at war with the isness of the situation. Whether that situation is somebody hurt you, you look a certain way, you have a snaggle tooth, I got a snaggle tooth. Whatever it is. As soon as we post judgment on something, we are telling the reality of life as it's manifesting that it's wrong. And that's a battle we cannot win. Because if it happened, it happened. It just is. And this is probably a conversation for another time. But to live in constant judgment with what is to be at war with life and war with self and war with other. And if I am fighting energetically, judgment is like a fighting, I'm not going to feel safe. I'm not going to feel belonging. I don't even want to go into that garden. I don't want to give myself to that because I don't like it. And this gets pretty nuanced, obviously. And I don't have an answer. None of this is an answer. Most of this is just ways of inviting in more curiosity to how we relate to and understand belonging. And the more that I personally have learned to accept life on life's terms, the safer I feel in the world. The more I can trust my crazy ideas and my capacity and my visions, the more that I can trust other people's crazy ideas and capacities and visions and the way that they are. And I can come into this settling of like, okay, life wants to do that like that. Who the hell am I to say otherwise? And there's been a very recent study / realization of how like perfectionism and or like constant judgment and thinking that we know what's right is actually like a colonizer mindset. And it's like a byproduct of white supremacy thinking in general. And that's a hard one to follow. And I believe it to be true. True enough. I have more to study on that. But there is a way to stop idolizing the self, that it knows what's best, and to hand over that authority to the divine, to the mystery, to the sacred, and say, okay, if this is happening, it must be somehow here. Like that's a big fucking ask. Like we're looking at a horrific genocide. We are looking at millions of people displaced so that we can get a bunch of pieces of metal to go on our phones and our computers. And it's just like, the world is incredibly hard to accept. And I'm not saying we have to, but on the micro level, there's an invitation there that feels really, really, really worthwhile. And I think can generate belonging and liberation. And we can unwind some of these patterns of making my human nature the most important player in this great story of life. And there's a lot of reason why I think we are so anthropocentric, why we are so human-centered instead of, let's say, ancestor-centered or spirit-centered or nature-centered. And, maybe, yeah, more on that to come. But when we are in judgment of self and other, and or giving our power away to other people to make us feel comfortable in who we are, we're feeding a really pattern that is not serving us. And so it's actually quite radical to reclaim your belonging, to remember that it's not up to other people, and to rethread yourself into this crazy matrix of aliveness that is going to be all kinds of things that you like and all kinds of things that you don't. And I envision a world where, all of us in our different ways can all sit at the same table and maybe we agree on nothing. And it's like, all right, can you pass us all? Thanks. Like, when do we stop trying to convince other people? There's like animal hair flying up through the screen right now. It's so cute. Spring cleaning must need to happen soon. But when do we stop trying to convince other people that we are right and wrong, or that they're right or wrong, and just say, okay, that's what is. That's where you're at. How's the noodles? Good, I'm glad you like them. But like, belonging is to me endeared and powered by acceptance of self first, and then of other, and then of life. And honestly, I would love to hear your feedback on that, and hear your feedback on, everything. To me, belonging is an ever blooming, ongoing conversation, because it's not just like I get to decide. My family loves to remind me when I go into like redefining words. They're like, well, there's a dictionary. And I'm like, I don't want to be told what something is. I want to feel it. I want to explore it. I want to bring it up with other people and be like, how do you feel about it? Wow, that's interesting. That feels true for me. Oh, that doesn't actually feel true for me at all. But like, you can have that. Like, how is there this culture of coexisting where boundaries are respected, where positive, respectful regard is not dependent on how much I like you, right? It's not dependent on anything. It's just inherent. And I'm so grateful for the many, many teachers and cultures and wisdom traditions that have taught me just at small amounts in the grand scheme of things, how to make peace with life, so that belonging isn't something that we have to make a big to-do list out of. It's actually just a softening of our hearts. It's a softening of our minds. And it's a reweaving of our authenticity back into this wild, wild, wild wholeness of a world. And I'm so excited to be exploring this directly and very indirectly through the Women's Gathering and through this online community. I have to name how hard it is to do this and to have a community that's also a business. Because, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours and 6 months of work go into making this happen. And everybody has different opinions about how the gathering should be ran, why membership costs money. It's just like, it just is. It is. And I'm going to show up for it. And I love feedback. And I love having the opportunity to remind myself of why, and I love hearing from other people. Sometimes I just have to go kickboxing about it in between when I get all fired up. What else wants to come through? I think the last piece here is maybe that it just takes time. The process of belonging is not fast. It's not immediate. It takes time for us to remember and soften and decondition and decolonialize ourselves. It takes time to breathe and to be in communities and be in relationship with ourselves long enough to think, oh yeah, there was rupture and we repaired. Or oh yeah, I said something stupid and hurt somebody and I'm not being kicked out of the tribe and I'm not going to starve to death. It takes time to remember this. So I'm really grateful for that. Hooey! All right, y'all. I don't even know if I hit record on my phone. I'm really hoping that this recorded on YouTube. So thank you so much for being here. This is just story time once a month and maybe more. We're going to have offerings from different folks, different women sharing their wisdom to this community. We're going to build a living library of these offerings, continue to share our hearts and our spirits in these chats, and create a community that's bigger than the gathering so that we can continue to practice being together in really meaningful ways so that hopefully this can ripple out into the world in a good way. I'm feeling really caffeinated now. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your participation in these conversations. And I care for you and I'm excited to see where this all goes. So that is all. Ciao for now. Temple of Belonging opening sentiment. Here we go.